All right, that's not a good way to start. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Why is that doing that? Is that really? That's not how it's supposed to work. All right, guys, welcome to the show. Tonight, we're going to have an awesome show for you. And before we get into it, I do want to remind you guys to check out our sponsors in the description down below, mypillow.com, promo code CanCon, and My Shroom Vibes to get your focus right. Microdosing. I absolutely love that stuff. Tonight's show is interesting. This is a gentleman that I had talked to back in August of last year while I was at GART Deadwood. And, we had lost touch. It was a crazy time going through GART and everything. And we had lost touch briefly. And then, with the Tina Peters saga going in full swing, he reached back out. And I wanted to give him an opportunity to tell his story. He's a former fire chief out in Colorado in Teller County. And he's got quite the epic story about election fraud out there in the Golden State, right? The gold standard for election integrity out there in Colorado. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Erik Holt. Erik, how you doing, sir?
What's up, Brian? I appreciate you having me on, man.
Absolutely. So, let's get into your story here. And to tell your story, you got to go back to the beginning to understand why you were out in Teller County and how you became the fire chief out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I'm a career fireman, obviously, as that progression happens, doing my thing. So I got out of the Army in 2008. I started at Fort Hood Fire and eventually kind of transferred within the DoD system up to Fort Carson. Loved being in the mountains, went through a divorce in 2018. And by like 2022, when this story kind of begins, the court had granted me full custody of both of my daughters. And so shift life was absolutely amazing. I love the dudes. I love the camaraderie. I love getting after it, but the kids come first. So I was looking, kind of keeping my eyes open, for what could happen. And Fluorescent Fire Protection actually called me on one weekend and said, "Hey, we need an interim chief. We got some chaos happening. Can you step in?" So I called my fire chief at the time. I'm like, "Hey, you cool with this?" Got his blessing. It was supposed to be a 2-week ordeal. But chaos has its way of changing the narrative, right? So that 2 weeks lapsed into 4 months of like doing this unpaid fire chief's gig as an interim. But it was actually during that period, like in that interim phase where like the court stuff became official, like it became permanent, you know what I'm saying? And so I never had an intention of putting in, but I did. And I was selected to be the permanent fire chief and just got to work, man. And I took a broken department that was, barely sputtering along into quite a machine. I mean, we went from like 5 responders at best. If you dialed 911, you might get an EMT, you might not. If your house is on fire, you might get somebody that's qualified to come in and put it out, right? To a year later, when this story kind of takes a turn, 65 personnel, certified, trained EMTs out the butt. We went from 18-minute response times when I took over. So from the time you dial 911 till somebody shows up that may or may not be qualified, right? 18 minutes. So if you're not breathing, man, or your spouse isn't breathing, that's a long time. So
Absolutely.
In January of 2023, as we kind of take this next fork, we were down to 7-minute response times with an average of 5 people showing up to your house within 7 minutes. So by all metrics, like great performance, right? Everybody should be happy with that. Otherwise I wouldn't have a story if they were.
And so this is in Teller County, Colorado. And tell me about Teller County. How big is Teller County?
About 50,000 people. The fire district was 66 square miles and we served about 6,500. A lot of those residents maybe were second homes or, whatever, but like, registered voters, if you will, within the census was between 55 and 6,500.
And what's the terrain like? Are you guys on the slope or are you guys?
It's pretty varied actually. So if you get, it's kind of tucked right behind Pikes Peak. So you have high alpine, just below where tree line cuts off. So about 10,000 feet of elevation. But as you go towards the west, you kind of hit that Lake George sort of high desert area. So it's pretty mixed, but mostly, like conifer forests, rolling mountains kind of.
Okay. I'm always curious because I'm in Florida and it's dead flat out here. And
Yeah.
I've been out in Colorado quite a bit between covering a trial for one of my co-hosts, some other friends, and some other things that I've done out there. And Colorado is absolutely gorgeous, by the way. It's a shame the politics
Yeah.
state level are so atrocious, because it's such a beautiful state. And I was trying to get so whenever I'm out there, and going a little off track here, but I always look around and I'm like trying to understand, as a Florida boy, how people are able to function. Like, how do you drive big ass fire trucks up in the mountains like this with these little winding roads and everything else like that? And just it always impresses me to see how you guys are able to maneuver and be able to function at the same capabilities that we do down here, where everything's perfectly flat.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes with, 18 inches of snow in one day is a pretty normal day in the winter out there, right? But I was actually in Florida about 2 weeks ago, man, and I think coming in from, the Gulf, I could see the entire state from, 30,000 feet. And maybe there was a hill in the middle somewhere, but
300 feet is our highest elevation. 312 feet.
is it? Wow. Yeah. So, I was living at 10,000 feet where my house was. So,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you're so right, man. Colorado is probably one of the most beautiful places you could ever be. They are land rich and scenic rich, and absolutely in famine when it comes to good policy and politics, right? So, uh, it's sad. It's sad to see, because when I first moved there in 2013, it was still a really good state.
Yeah, that's what happens with the beautiful places. All the most beautiful states just get destroyed. Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado, Florida. Fortunately, they haven't gotten their fangs in us yet. They did for a little while. We fought back, and
Yeah.
we're pretty squared away down here. But so tell me about you. So you go out to Teller County, you get this interim fire chief, you completely and totally flip around the department out there. You go from these long ass response times, you narrow it down to something that is beneficial and good for the community. And then what happens?
So because of that chaos I had mentioned when I was the interim, what had happened is, uh, the guy before me had gotten into some issues with the board. They investigated, they terminated him. A lot of upheaval about that. So a bunch of the board had resigned. So I think three out of, there's a 5-person board. So one was vacant. I had actually served on that board in a temporary fashion, like as a gap stop about 6 months prior, um, which isn't abnormal, man. I'm a fireman, right? In that community, so that's why I got the call. I was known, but because of all that, the board elections were coming in May of 2023, and you had two factions that sort of formed. And I call them factions. Like, I had the board that had gone through like a special process where the county commissioners had interviewed anybody interested and selected them. They had decided to hire me, supported my vision for improvement of the department, all that, right? And then you had this other group that was like, "Oh, we can do everything better," but they didn't have very altruistic intentions. I'll say, right? They're like HOA Karens, or just blatant baby boomers with a bad attitude that just wanted to be grumpy about something, right? So it was kind of like the incumbent board that had hired me versus this very vicious kind of group that formed. And so I really stayed out of it. Like, it didn't matter to me who was going to be on the board, right? You can say all you want when you're running for office. There's even laws that protect that. You're not held liable for it, but it's a different game when you get in the seat and you kind of realize, like, oh, I have to abide by laws. I'm not vote for Pedro. I can't promise snack machines in every classroom, right? Like, there's some reality that hits. So I did my best to kind of just focus on the job, man, and let the incumbent board was running for reelection. All of them wanted to continue on the success and the mission. Um, and so, like, in January, February, man, it got pretty nasty, and we're looking at May coming up. The opposing side that we'll get into on this story, tries to drag me in a couple times by talking smack, and like, they failed to realize, like, I'm a fire chief. I'm not an elected board member. My focus is not on, the
Politics.
community conflict and the politics. Mine's to operate a fire department and the metrics up. So, like, response times, qualified people, um, We had some pivotal sort of moments. We had a big fire that threatened our entire town. We were looking at. I remember sleeping out at my desk that night in this fire. I think this is like April, early April, late March, right? So we're almost to the May thing, but this fire starts just outside of our town, just outside of our district, but it's 70 miles an hour pushing at us in the winds, crazy windstorms. Um, and it's bearing, I mean, like the direction's pointing directly at the town. So, my job, as I always eloquently like to say, was take your worst nightmare and let me try to solve it, right? So up all night trying to figure out where to place people and all this, and we don't even it doesn't even end up crossing into our district. We got enough forces out there with the neighboring county, all the neighboring departments, and we stopped this thing, which was a miracle. And
That
then
was.
in the end of April, so literally the week before we get into the actual elections, where this breaking point happens, we threw our first community event. Um, in the history that I could see, probably 20 years worth of like fundraising events and this and that. The highest they'd ever done was like a pancake breakfast. They made $8,000, in a single day, which is great. We threw one where it was kind of a celebration of like the rebuild of the department. We generated $27,000 in one day. We had hundreds of people out, like community members. We had kids competitions. You can go to YouTube and actually, it's called the Fluorescent Fire first annual family fire muster. So it was like one weekend before we jump into this election thing. Uh, and like we are riding a high wave of like the most community involvement, the best response times, all this stuff. So I really wasn't too concerned with it. Even if one of the board members wasn't reelected, somebody else would come in, they would want to carry that momentum, right? Again, I wouldn't be here if that story had worked itself out.
Right.
So
And so at this time, like you're not campaigning or even endorsing any particular side of the election that's about to come up, and all five board members were up.
all five, which is supposed to never happen, right?
Okay.
Uh, you're not supposed to have more than like half the turnover. So obviously
Right.
one year it'd be three positions, 2 years later it would be two positions, right? And so there's never a complete turnover.
And that makes sense because you want continuity. Like you don't want to have five fresh people come in and be handed the reins and none of the five know how to do anything. You want, some other people there, two or three people there to show you how it's supposed to function, what you're supposed to be doing, how the community has been able to run for as long as it has. To flip all five, to have an election where all five can be removed from there is kind of odd.
Yeah, I mean, my role throughout the whole, I guess 5 months or whatever of like campaigning and all this, which isn't really normal either in like a local election, but these people were gearing up, and again, they created this slate. You have to, if you vote for one of us, you have to vote for all five of us. We're running as a slate. That was very weird to see.
That's weird.
Yeah. So it was chaotic, and my job was obviously to focus on the fire department. So at one point, like I remember somebody was like, "Oh well, if you don't vote for them, they won't respond to your home." And I have to, as the fire chief, jump in and be like, "That's absolutely BS. Our job is to respond to whoever it is. I don't care." Um, and I tried my best, and I wasn't the greatest statesman. I'll say that. I mean, I snapped back, of course, but it wasn't me going out and doing it. It's these people making stupid comments. There was another inflection point where like the guy that ended up becoming the board president called me a misogynist on the internet, on social media, if you will. And like, mind you, I'm a guy raising two teen girls by myself, right? And my department's like 50% women, and they all love me as the leader, right? Like there's never, so this outside force sort of like tells the community that. And I clapped back at him privately in text messages, so it didn't go public. But like, there was a constant attempt to like draw me into the fray for sure.
So we roll around to March, or excuse me, May of 2023.
May.
March, April, May of 2023,
Yep.
and the election comes up, and what happens?
So May 2nd, 2023, the election happens. The incumbent board, because of all the chaos, had hired a law firm to actually administer the election. So in Colorado, Title 32 for special districts, um, elections obviously have the rules and how they have to be administered, but it's a board governance like duty. It by statute, that's who it falls on. So they didn't want any impropriety. And I thought they made a good move. They hired a law firm to run this separate. They paid the law firm to do that. The law firm represented the fire district, but like a third party paralegal that worked in the actually came down and became the designated election official. Um, and they held it. So my role was like I worked from home. I had nothing to do with the election. I wasn't there for any election business except to open the door and say, "Here you go." I had met with the DO the night before. She wanted to make sure that the security cameras weren't facing like where ballots could be seen, right? So she placed the screens where they faced the camera, where the same as if somebody was standing in front of the booth, like you couldn't see. So we did that. I opened the station up in the morning. And then I left. I worked from home. I didn't vote in it. I didn't have any participation. And I ended up there. We had a couple calls throughout the day, as fire departments do. The main one being we responded to a gentleman's home who was having like difficulty breathing. We called for a helivac or a helicopter medevac, and that ended. That location, the landing zone, is at the fire station. So I go to the fire station. I tell everybody like, hey, we got to freeze everything going on, shut the doors, batten the hatches. There's a helicopter coming in. Um, and that gentleman unfortunately goes from a distressed respiratory problem to a cardiac arrest, and we're doing CPR, and I'm in the parking lot, man, and he doesn't make it. So this whole thing went from like, transfer him on a helicopter, they take off, to like 30-45 minute ordeal where the guy doesn't make it. So now you got coroner coming out and all that. But we did everything we could to keep the election running. I then have to go to the family, and that's my job. I'm the fire chief at a local thing. I go with the paramedic and I think their lieutenant. We drive up, we inform the family, which obviously is a shock. The guy left alive, and we have to go back telling him he didn't make it. So when I come back to the station, I'm picking up my vehicle and I'm getting ready to leave, and one of the people that was voting had just come out to me. And again, I'll become a fire chief in a small community, man. Everybody knows who I am. It's not like some hidden secret here. But she's like, I want you to see this. And she shows me a picture of a poll watcher on her phone, like in the electioneering box. And I'm sure every county and state in the union has that like 100-foot, 150-foot perimeter. So everybody should kind of understand. But she's standing in that on her cell phone. Now, mind you, she's supposed to be seated inside the polling location, and you're not allowed to have phones. You're not allowed to electioneer, none of that. And I was like, oh, that's concerning. You need to go tell the DEO that. And she tells me which she overheard. So she was walking out behind the poll watcher as they came. And on the phone, she overheard her say, well, did you pay him? What vehicle is it? Is it the people pulling in right now? And then she's standing there on her phone, and she had snapped that picture, right, of the poll watcher. And then she said she observed her motion and then tell people who to vote for and then go back in. And so I was like, that's very concerning. Report that to the DEO. I take her to the DEO, and then I leave the station, man. It's not for me to handle. That's for the election official. So it's a 12-hour election, right? Usually in local elections are pretty chill, but this one wasn't. So I go back at the end of the day. I had seen on social media poll watchers were posting the results before like the designated election official officially posted them. And college celebrating who had won. Immediately it jumped out like 3 times higher voter turnout than we had anticipated. And all of the winning candidates for what was posted, I think it was something like 325 was like the winning, again, a local election, not a huge turnout, right? But you had like 329, 325, 324, 324, 323. And you're like, that's a really close spread.
Let me hold on. Let me interrupt you here. So you have 5 seats that are open. Is it a heads up, or is it the top 5 take the 5 seats?
As I think it's just the top 5 vote getters, right? So they I think there was 12 names on the ballot, if I remember right.
And so it's the top 5 out of those 12. Is it like a you pick 5?
Yeah, exactly that. So that's a really good point.
Strange.
Because when you have a 1% to 2% spread on the top 5 people, and then number 6 jumps down to like 150 maybe, you're like, wait a minute, that stands out. Why are they so bunched? But that night, I was like, well, they ran as a slate, so maybe that was a successful campaign, right? Um, I was concerned of the legality of running as a slate. Don't get me wrong, but again, I'm not administrating the election, so I didn't have to worry about those things. So I go, I get, I lock the fire station. The DO's leaving. She looks like she's been through a 15-round heavyweight bout, bro. And I'm like, you okay? And she's like, this is the most chaotic day of my life, man. Like, this was supposed to come to a small town, administer an election, go home, cash in my overtime. This is not how that went. And I'm like, oh, geez, all right, well, get home safe, lock the door, I go home. Um, and so, like, in detailing this, man, like, I wasn't shook at all. I didn't care who had won per se, right? Like, I was comfortable with the board that were the incumbents. None of them won the elected seats. And so I was like, all right, well, all this rhetoric was cool for them, to get elected, but now the real business starts. Uh, so another day goes by. I'm in the local grocery store, which is a tiny little like converted gas station.
Hey,
Uh,
Eric, hold on. Before we go on to, because I know there's more to this story, but before we go on, I just want to unpack the election itself. So the top 5 people that ended up winning the seats, you said they were all within, a couple percentage points of each other in terms of the total vote share. Do you know how the 6 through 12, how they looked in terms of the dispersion?
so you had the top 5 that won that were all like 320s
Right.
of votes, and then you had like 150, 120, 119, right? These aren't, don't hold me to the exact, but like a huge drop off, and then like 2 candidates almost had no votes.
Okay.
And so it was like very apparent that this clumping of the 5 at the top, there was a coordinated effort, because you can't statistically get to that close as 5 random people. There's no way to do it.
Okay.
If Because a lot of people will vote and they don't even know this person, or like, so like errors happen in that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. I'm just trying to get to whether there's, kind of the evidence that it was like the 1 through 5 versus 6 through 10 as the dueling slates there, so to speak, and how effective of a campaign it is to run at the local level on that. Because I'm trying to think of my local politics, and most of us would have no idea that 5 of our county commissioners were running as a slate together.
Right.
And so for the number to be that close, 325 people, to be within 5 votes in terms of all going for the same person, that's either a very, very, very well orchestrated campaign, or that's something else.
Yeah, I would say, like, I don't know how the campaign side, obviously, like, that night I was like, well, shoot, it must have worked.
Mm.
Uh, um, but I was in disbelief, just because I remember seeing like how close they were, and I was like, even the incumbents like would be spread out at a smaller vote total, but like 20, and they're already seated, so people already know their names guaranteed,
Mm.
right? They've been there, they've been in the newspapers, they've had their. Um, and then incumbents always have that edge when you go
Yes,
in. They're the known commodity, right? So
always.
it was surprising, right? And I guess I mean I definitely see your point of like, naturally could it be that effective? I don't think so. And as we get into the story, I think everybody will understand why I don't believe that.
Well, the other thing is, it seems to me like, especially in terms of your job, the community was doing better under the commissioners, or the board that was previously in place. I mean, was there any reason for the community as a whole to be disgruntled with the service that they were getting?
No, I mean, again, I think I could have been a better statesman for sure, but my job wasn't politics. My being a fire chief's a gruff job, right? It's grimy, it's dirty, it's making some hard decisions in hard times.
Absolutely.
So, there, as you get into bigger cities, of course, like you're more on a political base, but mine was more operations driven. Um, yeah, and so the incumbents ran on the success. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely, we had rebranded the department. Again, recruited. We were competing with like budgets that were 4 or 5 times what we had, because of just recruiting efforts and like the morale we had built. You know what I mean? Like, you've been in the military, man. You know, like high speed units and then
Yeah.
low morale units, right? So they ran on that. And again, the week before we had this election take place, we threw the biggest fundraising like community celebration to literally just celebrate the department 5 days before the election took place. So it made no sense that they wouldn't get reelected in a normal circumstance. Let's end with that. You know what I mean? It's like,
I
on
got
that
you.
point, you can't out campaign that. I'm sorry.
I got you. All right. So what happened after the election?
So I got, I go back to working, and there's you enter a lame duck, just like any election, right? So there's a couple of weeks of like outgoing with the incumbent board, and then the election still has to be certified. They got to take oaths. There has to be a transfer of power, all this stuff. So it didn't really take effect right away. But like a day, maybe 2 days. It's hard to think back this far, but like I was in the grocery store, as I mentioned, and somebody else came up to me and they're like, "Hey, I was being filmed by these poll watchers in there, like, and they were mean mugging me. You could see them like talking shit and like holding a phone recording me." And I was like, "What?" You know, again, I remember the DEO that night. The election official just looked beat down, but like I didn't know the intimate details of like what I wasn't there, man. So I was like, "That's super concerning. Let me put you in contact with the DEO who's got to certify all this stuff and takes the complaints." So I call her. I leave the grocery store. I go back and I call her. I'm like, "Hey, I just heard this." And she's like, "Eric, we've gotten like 3 complaints, and there's something concerning right now." And like from other people that had directly like emailed her or called her, right? And I'm like, "Really? Like, what are you hearing?" You know what I mean? And she was smart. She didn't really tell me much, right? Like she keeps a again, they work for a law firm. They're not going to make a mistake of like leaking information. But it was enough. She's like, it just points at like the candidates and the poll watchers. And, we need to kind of figure out what we need to do here because in 2 weeks, or I think it was 15 days later, they certify the election, right? So you're in this window. Um, so I end up talking to her boss, who is an attorney, right? Like name on the law firm attorney, and somebody that I, as the fire chief, like if I had HR issues or like a statute question, I would call her, on my cell phone. Like we were pretty tight in a work professional setting. So I call her, and her name's Linda. I'm like, "Linda, like, what's going on? You know what I mean? Like, what do we need to do here? I don't want this to affect operations." And she's like, "I'm figuring that out." Uh, and she starts talking to the incumbent board president again without me. Like, they have phones too, right? So I'm not the conduit to that. Um, and so this is when, man, I had heard enough where I was just like, I would say it was 2 days, 2 full days of like, it's just burning in my stomach of like, what the fuck here? Um, and hearing stuff and just like those numbers flash in my head. I can't get it out of my head. And so I call Linda again, the attorney, and I'm like, "Hey, are you getting anywhere?" And she's like, "I think somebody's gonna have to look into this, but I don't really know the details of that." And I'm like, "All right, well, I'll call you in the next day or two." But in that, I always tell this story. Like I went home, and again, I'm a single dad, right? So I like make my girls dinner, spend time with them. This is all running in my head. Tuck them in, and I go sit on my bed, like just sitting there, and I'm like out loud talking, which isn't a very normal thing to do, I will say. But I'm
It's only
like,
time
"Eric,
to respond.
yeah, there's a medical diagnosis, I'm sure, but I'm just sitting at the edge of my bed. I'm like, all right, man, you're an idiot if you look into anything because these people are elected to be your bosses, and if you piss them off now, like those girls you just tucked in aren't gonna have sneakers come Monday. You know what I mean? And food and all that. This is my livelihood, but man, I'm grappling like the moral thing here. Like I'm grappling with it. And I wasn't a super political person at this point, man. I wasn't, I remember the 2020 election. I remember Tina's, I'm not that far from Mesa County. Um, and I was like, man, I don't want to get into some weird conspiracy here. Even though I was like, nothing adds up in these elections. It wasn't my role. I was a fire chief. That's what I was real good at. And so I literally was like, all right, if you look into it, man, you can't turn away, and you got to know that, and you got to see this through to the end. And I'm like, literally again answering myself. I'm like, "You ready for that?" I'm like, I guess so, man. And that decision has shaped the last 2.5 years of my life, and I'm still committed to that conversation. But
Good.
I made the choice. And I had to do that out loud to myself so I could hear myself say the words, man. And I just said, whatever it takes, I'm going to expose if something was wrong. Um, and that decision, brother, changed my life trajectory fully. So the next thing I did is I went to work the next day, of course, right? I get off at like 4 p.m. I drive to Walmart in my own truck, in my, civilian clothes, not in uniform. I buy a thumb drive. And I had mentioned the security cameras. So those were operated and maintained off-site by a third-party company. So that company's in Woodland Park, Colorado. It's about 15 minutes down the road. I drive from Walmart to that company, and I'm like, hey, here's a thumb drive. I need the footage from election day put on this, and I'll pay for it. I pay for it out of pocket. And some may say because I was a fire chief, I was allowed to do that, but everybody needs to understand it's a tax-funded public building. And so literally anybody could walk in and say, I want this,
Yeah.
and it's
FOIA.
open records.
Or Cora, as you guys call them out there.
Core out there, FOIA for media and stuff like that, right? So uh, again, I do this all out of pocket, off work, kind of secretive. And I think the next day they called me, and I went in and I swiped my personal debit card, man, and they hand me this thumb drive. And I talk about this thumb drive like I've never held the launch codes to a nuke, man, but that's what it felt like.
In that situation, I know how that feels.
Yeah,
You're
because
like,
it was the
man, this
unknown
thing
of
is
like
so-"
what happens once I crack this.
Yeah.
So I go home, cook dinner, tuck the girls in the same nightly routine, and I'm like, all right, it's time, man. I don't know what I'm doing. So I have an idea that I'm going to find something, but I don't know how to even identify that. I don't know election laws. So I go on real quick and I Google election laws for the state of Colorado and I print them out. And in there, there's like poll watcher rules. I was like, oh, that might be useful. General election rules, all this stuff, right? So a couple pages of it. And I plug the thumb drive in and I'm like, shit. it's it's something like 41 hour clips. There's 4 cameras on a 12-hour day. One of the cameras wasn't like full, it was like activated only when somebody was in front of it. So there's like 40 hours of footage. And I'm an idiot when it comes to election laws. I'm not an attorney, I'm not an investigator, nothing. But for the next couple days in the evenings, I start watching hour by hour the entire election play out on these cameras. So the first batch of that was 12 hours in the station where you can see, um, far from the camera is the entrance to the fire station. People come in, they line up, they get their ballots, they go behind the screen. But directly under the camera is the poll watcher station, which is great because you have a high definition 4K view of the poll watchers. And because of the complaints, I know that's who I'm supposed to look at. So if you want to pull up that Dropbox, I'll show you the first thing is if you scroll down, it's the one with like the open laptop. It's a picture.
Sure. This one. Let me zoom in here. Let me make it full screen and then zoom in. And there we go.
Boom. So this is within the first hour, like somewhere in that first hour of footage. I'm looking at the Colorado statutes and the rules, right? And it says no recording devices, no cell phones, no tabulating of votes, no interfering, no determining how an elector votes, right? All these things. And as a layman, I saw this and I was like, oh, well, there's a cell phone and a laptop. And if you zoom in on the laptop screen, it's recording the room in front of her, which is where voters are voting. So if you look at that little laptop, you can see the water bottle stacked to the side there and the color. You can see that on the left side of her screen, right? So I was like, ooh, those are violations of law. That's illegal, right? In layman's terms. So what I literally did was put tally marks. And I was like, okay. So I go through 40 some odd hours of just making tally marks when I saw something that was black and white in the statute that said this is against the rules. To me as a layperson, that meant that was illegal. And so when I get done with like 40 hours of footage, there's hundreds of tally marks on this page. And I go, oh man, you can't commit hundreds of election violations by accident. That's what I literally sat there and said. I said, there's no way you can do that. So if hundreds of election violations took place, it can't be by accident. That means there must be something that's a scheme that happens, right? And so the next thing I did was I went back
Can
through.
can I interrupt you just for 1 second?
Of course.
How do you guys vote in Teller County? Like do you guys vote? Is it a hand election?
Yeah.
Do you have machines?
Paper ballot, stuffed in, hand count, which is a
So you
big
have hand marked and hand counted.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you would think, right? But we're going to come back to that because that is a huge point in my story that's different, right? Because I remember Tina's with Dominion voting and all that stuff, like hearing that votes change when they scan it, right? And so for me, I was like, oh, well, this doesn't align with the election fight in the country. But I'll come back to that because it is a huge point that I have to make in this.
Sure.
So I went back through is basically what I was doing. And I was like, all right, I need to figure out there's got to be something that's correlating this or coordinating all of these pieces, right? And so I did remember at that point, like the second time through, I was like, oh yeah, I can look at what time I was there because I remember my call card and that complaint that allegedly happened at that same time, right? So I went back, and you have that video if you want to cue it. It's the outside camera, and you can hear this lady walk out of the station, and the wind is blowing. So unfortunately, you can't hear the "did you pay him" part because it gets cut out. But everything else that I said about that complaint is corroborated, and you can hear it. And I would love for you to just play it. Yep, that one.
Now, just real quick, Eric, what is that sign on the ground? Do you know what that is? Is it because it looks like
That's the electioneering sign.
Okay, so that's saying no, that's the 100 feet from the pole.
Yeah, so you see those cones out there? Each cone had that taped to it, right?
Okay.
Or like it was a stick at one point. That one got knocked down, but the one right next to it has it. I mean, there's probably 20 of those signs out there. That one just happened to blow right there.
And that's marking the 100 feet.
Yep. So this is a poll watcher, right? She just walks out of the station and she's talking on her smartwatch, right, on the cell phone. But that first part was real hard to hear. Right now it'll get clear, and I'll let you guys listen.
It sounds like she said, so this is the one you think that's right here at the station already?
Yep. And so what you'll see next, that's the important part because it corroborated what the complaint was that I received. And you can just sort of move the scroll, but she motions over to those people that just pulled in right behind, at the top of the camera. She motions them over and then literally like gives them a hug up close, and you can hear her talking to them. What she's doing is telling them the names to go vote for. So if you just want to move the scroll so people can actually see that part. So these are the two people walking up right there, right? And you see, like, if you're friends with somebody, you don't go, hi, very kind of robotic, right?
Right.
And then she walks up. So then there's another still picture in there that matches that same one where she's like hugging them and she gets in real close. And on the audio, you can hear her, basically telling, hey, these are the 5 names, go do that. So that is the next sort of, 2 frames over. But she gets in real close to these people that were like, hey, after she motioned them over, right? So what this did is it corroborated a couple ideas that I had in my head. One, she's on the phone with somebody. So somebody off-site is coordinating people showing up, right? And the complaint that was verbally said to me was, did you pay him? And then, is this who's pulling in? And then motions them over. So although I didn't hear the pay part, it was that somebody's coordinating off site, and these poll watchers are receiving voters and then telling them who to vote for. And then I go back to the inside camera, and what I kept catching throughout the whole day was like, there's a couple like egregious ones where like people were like tipping their hat to the poll watchers as they go to put their ballot in the box, or they were like super thumbs up or pointing. Some are like kind of secretive about it. Others are very, out there about it. And every time they would do that, I could see the poll watchers doing something, because again, the camera's like behind them facing down. And so what that ends up being, you have a video of it and you also have a still shot of it in that Dropbox. If you need the name of the file, I can pull it up real quick. But
Yeah, I think it's this one.
comparing numbers on track counters, that one.
I
So
think it's hiding clicker. No, not that one.
no, that would be hard to see, but it's the one that says comparing numbers on track counters.
There it is.
And I just sort of gave away the thing there. But watch this guy with the ponytail. If you can zoom in on that.
I don't know if I'm able to zoom in because it's a video. No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, hey, on my socials, I have this stuff up, so anybody can go look at this if they're interested. But what he just did is he turned and he's holding a track counter, one of those circular counters that, you click a button and it counts for you. And so she pulls hers out and compares. They share the numbers, and the guy sitting right behind him also looks down and he clicks a couple times to make sure their counts all the same.
Now, are these poll watchers, and you don't have to dox them and use names or anything like that, but are they partisan poll watchers? Are they independent poll watchers?
They are poll watchers assigned by the 5 people that won. So every candidate was allowed to have a poll watcher. The incumbent board chose not to. The people that won the election put their poll watchers in position, right?
So those 5 people are poll watchers representing or appointed by the 5 winners.
Yep, exactly. And I think there was a 6th by one of the people that didn't get a lot of votes. But so there were 6 poll watchers total. But yeah, directly like appointed by, they had to take an oath, they had to take training on all the rules and all that stuff to be poll watchers. But it was directly from the candidates. So I think when we go back to the conversation about gold standards, that's one of those implying that this is set up to cheat from the beginning, right? When the candidates get to select poll watchers, there's a problem. That's not fair and impartial. So,
well,
anyways,
this is a nonpartisan race too, right? Like these people weren't
correct.
Republicans and Democrats.
No, I think personally, of course, but I think they were on both sides. To be quite honest, this part of my greater talking point is, I know we attack the left pretty heavily, and we know that they cheat pretty heavily. But there are people on the right that want to protect the ability to do that as well, especially at the local level, right?
Absolutely.
So this is where I've had a hard time breaking out this story, is that it is 2 sides that do it, and everybody wants to point fingers, but I'm the guy in the middle kind of saying, no, I kind of have both parties doing it, because I know the political affiliations of most of these people. And so this just is what it is, man. But like, that doesn't take away from what I'm showing you and what took place, right? And the laws that govern these things and the corruption that covers it, which is really my narrative, and how that plays into bigger things like Tina's story in the state of Colorado, and the electors. I know you had Leah Hoops on, which she's a hero, right? And Mark Cook and all that work. Like, yes, I do believe paper ballots and hand counting, if it's impartial and it's fair and corruption free, that's the only way we could do it with ID. And so it's hard because a lot of it is against the voting machines, but in reality, like, there's some laws and enforcement that have to back that. And I would love to kind of finish on that, but so yeah, what I ended up catching was the scheme that unfolded, and just to save time, basically, again, I can confirm, and I saw it, that somebody's offsite. They're having people show up. A poll watcher will walk out. I only showed you one video of it, but it's hundreds of times that one of those 6 poll watchers will walk outside and greet somebody.
That was my next question. This wasn't an isolated thing. This was something that was consistent throughout the day.
Yeah, hundreds of times. Hundreds of times.
Wow.
And so like every one of these actions of like leaving the polling location, telling somebody who to vote for, coming back in, tabulating the vote on your counters, keeping track of it, and recording people, those are all separate violations of the law, right? In aggregate, most of them are just misdemeanors, which we'll come back to as one of the big issues here. But criminal conspiracy is a felony, and so is fraud. So there is a nexus to that next level, but for the most part, like this is what we're dealing with, and I want everybody to understand. Every time one of those actions took place, it's a misdemeanor at minimum. But you're talking hundreds and hundreds in a 12-hour day that are caught on 4K camera. Okay. Um, and so I was sitting to myself again. I'm just at home in like my skivvies at night, sitting and watching this stuff and tabulating it. I was like, is that enough to guarantee an outcome? Yes, it's bad enough to tabulate throughout the day, but if you don't know the vote totals or the count, I guess you can't 100% guarantee victory. So now we come to the other camera. And the top two videos I would love for you to play in that Dropbox, because this is where I parked my fire engine 364 days this year. But this one day we pulled the fire truck out and they set up the ballot counting room. It was actually supposed to be inside the fire station. There was two separate buildings. They didn't go into the room. They just set up in the bay, which for me was really good because it's directly under a high definition camera that was security for that fire engine and its equipment. And it also has audio. So the first one that jumps out to me, I don't want to give it away, but the fixed one, okay? And I'm going to shut up because this is me watching it and I hear this and imagine what this does to me.
Just real quick before I play those two, I do want to go back to this one just for 1 second, and I want you to notice here that this woman is going to click that clacker twice when the people walk up. So watch this. When she puts the phone in her left hand or her watch in her left hand, watch her right hand. She clicked it 1, 2, and that's the little clacker thing in her hand. So counting that these people are going to be votes for, I would assume. I mean, again,
no, that's it. Two people walk up, she clacks twice, right? I mean, that correlates, right? And again, like in an isolated, you would say, oh, well, that's kind of weird. Hundreds of times it's no longer a if. It's like it's hundreds of confirmations that's what's happening.
Right. Okay, so this is them counting now?
Yeah, so let me give you a quick. The guy closest on the bottom with the beard. I want you guys to watch him and the guy next to him, but listen to when they read these names. So they're unsealing ballots and they're reading the names of the ballots cast. And then the election judge says something that made me jump out of my seat, but I'm going to let you guys hear it.
Okay.
Okay, I have it done. Okay.
This election's fixed.
That is a paid election judge. Okay, somebody assigned to ensure that the rules were followed. What I wanted you guys to observe with that guy sitting, that's a poll watcher. That's two poll watchers. They're allowed to be in the ballot counting room to observe. But did you catch? He clicks.
Yep.
And he's in plain sight of an election judge. And the other poll watcher is coughing to cover it while he's also texting on his phone. All of those things are violations of law again.
You see his hand down there. Oop, sorry.
You hear them? Click, click.
Yep.
So now we had a different one, right? So the next chapter of this quote unquote investigation I'm doing is one, I'm not going to accuse the election judges being in on it, but they're comfortable watching election fraud take place. These people are literally sitting there across the table, no barrier between that, and you can hear it on the camera, you can hear it in person, right? Reads 5 names, click, click, because she read 2 ballots. Click, click. It's in plain sight. She's also not enforcing the guy's on his cell phone. And then she says this election's fixed. Like, that's a joke. This person's been through the state training. This person is paid. I won't get too much into that, but I was like unnerved that I saw that interaction. And then let's play the other one. This was the following ballot count. So 2 other poll watchers come in. They're very casual here. If you can turn it up all the way, I know it's really tough on the audio, but these are again posted on my socials on Justice for Holt, so people can go watch them for themselves. But play it, and I'll shut up.
Here, we were told ahead of time, be on, cross your T's, dot your I's, and here are the rules, and stressing the rules, and I'm like, so Sarah, do you know this county? Because I said, who is gonna enforce these rules? Not me. And she said, well, yeah, I'm gonna have to. Here.
So are they not from your county?
I don't know. I think they were county level, like, they worked for county-wide elections and maybe statewide elections. So they're official election judges. They know the game. But she just flat out tells people that have been committing election fraud all day, who's going to enforce the rules? Not me.
Right.
Like, bitch, that's your job. Literally. So when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, man. And you want to talk about a fire being lit. Again, this fire is still burning, but everything in my periphery that I had heard about elections came into a straw. And I was like, free Tina Peters, first of all, right? Because again, I knew about her case, but I was like, everything that anybody's ever said is true. If this election judge can sit there and just brazenly say, I'm not even going to enforce the rules here. Holy shit. So one more video I'd love for you to play real quick, man.
Sure.
It's the very last one. It says touching and opening ballot. So this is the other set. There was 3 ballot counts that day. This is the 3rd set. And what you're going to see, again, poll watcher guy, you saw him earlier showing the counter.
Yep.
Those are ballots, sealed ballots on the table that they are counting. Nowhere in the world is anybody allowed to touch, be within visual range to read the name of the elector and who they voted for. And what you're about to see is they're so comfortable with these election judges, he reaches down, grabs a knife out of his pocket, and opens a ballot. Go ahead and play it.
One of my friends did respond with Bailey, not like, push it in there.
And so that's a sealed envelope that I'm assuming has the elector's name on it still.
Yep.
And
Has
so
the elector's name and who they voted for.
Yeah, that's absolutely not supposed to happen.
Absolutely not.
It's fascinating to see this because we've become, all we've ever seen so far is the machine fraud. The universal mail-in ballot fraud coupled with machine fraud, and other things that are derelictions of duty, like not doing signature verification, those kinds of things. But this mainly happens in more of the popular elections where you have massive voter turnout and you got to manufacture thousands upon thousands of ballots to win. But this is an election here where, if you compare it to Mesa County in 2021, what happened in the Tina Peters race is her whole board flipped, just like yours did.
Exactly. Yeah. Very relatable, right?
Right.
And how easy is it to keep positive control of an election where 800 total people show out, right?
Right.
And this is back to the bigger conversation. If you can't do that at a local election with 800 people and keep it legit, and the punishments for cheating are so severe that you're afraid to do it, then what election can we have?
Right. And I mean, I'm not going to lie, this isn't like the most in-your-face egregious fraud that we've seen, but this is fraud nonetheless. And this is fraud that is impacting your whole community. It's impacted your life for sure.
Yeah.
and I'm sure when you have this type of fraud taking place on small counties throughout the country, or especially throughout Colorado, I mean, we know two right now, Teller County and Mesa County.
Yeah.
You begin to change the politics of that particular county. And once you change the politics of these conservative leaning counties and you start putting in the Democrat progressive, more, DSA type, and I'm not saying I know that that's what these candidates were. I'm told that Mesa County, they were more progressive, that replaced the incumbents. I don't know the politics of the people in Teller County, but either way, there's a reason that you're seeing this, surge like this at the local level, and it's because that's what influences the politics of that community and changes how that community, votes in larger elections as well.
Yeah. Well, let me give you this, Brian. You know where this has been happening for 70, 80 years? School board elections.
Big time. Huge.
Absolutely. So you
Absolutely.
get progressives that take over school boards in this comfortable fraud. And I will say this was school board adjacent in that Teller County had a lot of commotion that you can go on and Google at the same time for the school board stuff. So you can get into the youth's head from kindergarten through high school and into universities by cheating a local election where there's 100, 200 voters.
Yep.
And guess what? That's how you build, a maniac army of progressives that are so brain poisoned. They don't know any better. Again, I have 2 teen girls, man, in this country. Like I fight that, that TikTok algorithm every single day. And that's where my platform is. I have it on video. But if you're ready, let me get into the end sort of point. I'll skip through the middle, like the biggest.
Well, I just want to, because we're talking about the hand marked, hand counted aspect of this, and this is something we've been pushing for a long time, but it also takes community involvement. And the fact that the only 5 poll watchers you really see predominantly pictured here are representatives of the candidates themselves and not members of the community shows that, I hate to say it, but there was a lackluster turnout from the community, and there was no interest from the community itself to be present there to make sure that everything was on the up and up. And we do have to police ourselves, guys. They're not going to come and their election judges and the DEO, the designated election official, they're not going to come and rescue you. They're there to do their job, to run the election and get out. And that's it. So, you got to have people on the ground that are willing to, stand up for this and point these things out and document these things. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% same day voting, voter ID,
Yes.
and so many eyes on it that one thing gets suspect, they get just so ridiculed and like called out, and it's unavoidable. We in the age of social media, right? So I don't agree with, the get out early and vote stuff. I know that, there's a guy that run around Pennsylvania that does that, and he claims to be successful. I'm not going to get into that. I think voting machines need to go away because I think we've seen that, right? Let's Tina all day long. But the narrative that paper ballots and a hand count are going to solve it, there's some other things that I'm going to give you in the rest of the story that have to take place with that. And one of those being stronger penalties. So to skip through this middle part and save everybody time, you can go to my socials, you can hear the rest of the story, but like these people seat themselves, they seize power while the incumbent board has filed a court injunction to stay this. Because the DA's office, I went to them with this footage, they open a criminal investigation. These 5 people go, we don't want to do that. We declare ourselves in power. They literally end up shutting the fire department down. In 33 days between the day I met with investigators, which was about a week before they self-seated, until I got fired as the fire chief. And I was all of a sudden left without a job, and I have 2 girls to care for, right? Complete retaliation. Again, I'm breezing over that. There's a pretty heavy point in my story of the length they went to and their motivations to get a hold of that security system and get rid of evidence. But I end up filing a federal lawsuit. I'm assigned actually the same judge that Mike Lindell and Joe Oatman had to deal with, Nina Wang. So after a 2-year breeze through that, I lose my case of retaliation based on Nina Wang's opinion that because I was the fire chief, everything was my official duty. Because I was able to get that footage, it was because I was a fire chief. because I cooperated with law enforcement, I would have been expected to, right? And my story changes because I went from being a fire chief of a local community to living in a 3,200 square foot log cabin home on 8 acres. To 2 years later, I have sold every asset I have, and I'm living in a camper across the country in my stepdad's backyard with my teen girls. Right, I've put everything into this, and I get the gut punch that I've lost on a crazy woke judge ruling, and it fucking destroyed me, mentally. Um, and luckily, I have a great army of friends, man. I got a buddy. He owns this company called Collecting Heads Media. He's one of my best friends since high school, and he's like, dude, just start recording the story and telling it. And I'm like, I've never made a video in my life. And so he literally like helps create a Justice for Hold on Facebook and my TikTok. And I literally just like, you can go scroll my early videos. I'm just walking around my backyard, like talking and telling 10-minute segments of it. But I start putting everything out there. And I breezed over it. So like there's a pivotal night. I'm like eating dinner with my girls and I'm just defeated, man. And I've lost everything in life. I don't have a job, I think I had gotten a job at this point, but it took a year of unemployment. They blacklisted me. And I had to move across the country. I'm living in a camper and I'm eating dinner with these girls and my girlfriend. And it's just silence, even though they're yapping like teen girls do. And I just was looking at him and said, these girls are never going to fucking see me quit anything, especially if there's a moral impact to it. And I said, whatever it takes, I'm going to do. And so they went to bed that night and I started reading case law. And I knew the judge got it wrong. And so I, by myself, filed an appeal to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And in this becomes the next chapter of where we go with the corruption. Man, I'm reading thousands of pages of documents, and I want you to pull one up. It's supplement 18. And in thousands of pages of stuff, when you have attorneys, they review a lot of stuff. But if you can zoom into that highlighted section there, I'm reading this, and I just casually read it. But I go to bed one night, and I shoot up out of a dead sleep, and I'm like, you see that name? Chief Deputy District Attorney Andy Vaughn?
Yes.
So August 1st, he suddenly, with no reason that I could tell in the world, ended the criminal investigation as a no file. Absolutely nobody got charged with crimes that you can see on high definition camera. And that name in my sleep connected a dot. Because again, I was litigating, but I had attorneys. The law firm that represents the people that were caught on camera committing election fraud, their name is Vaughn and DeMuro Law Firm, LLC, in the same city, Colorado Springs, Colorado, as the DA's office. And Chief Deputy District Attorney is the number 2 in the whole office. Okay, so you have the elected DA and his deputy below it. And if you look at Vaughn, it has that AN ending, which is a little bit unique. And so is the law firm. So the next morning, I like wake up and I go, I call this company Kinetic Investigations out of Georgia, actually, but it's a PI company. The guy is super dope. He was human intelligence in the Army, somebody I trusted, right? I found that military connection that I could trust. And I said, hey, can you run these names, and tell me what comes back? And later that day, because he's quick, he came back and he said, it's a 99% probability it's father and son.
Wow.
Father being lead counsel at Vaughn and DeMuro Law, and son being Chief Deputy District Attorney at the DA's office. So I take that information, brother, and I go back to my timeline because I have everything. It's in court. So I served my lawsuit. I file it July 14th, I think it was. It might have been the 16th, 2023. They're served July 28th, 2023. Son cancels a criminal investigation out of nowhere the first of 3 days later as a no file. Imagine my shock. These people got away with election fraud because the DA also has corruption going on. So Michael Allen is the elected DA then, and he still is now. I hit him up on Twitter with an open letter. I tagged the news organization. I think I actually tagged you, Brian. Hey, found this conflict of interest that was never declared. I'm asking that this be reexamined. I wake up the next day and guess who followed me on Twitter? The
Who?
DA, Michael Allen, the DA. So I'm not shy in any way. I immediately message him. I'm like, hey man, glad you saw my letter. Can we chat? And he never really engaged. He'll reply with a couple words or a sentence, and like,
They're very timid.
yeah, a week or two later, So basically, like for 45 days, I'm pushing him, and he's like, well, I'll take a look into it. And then he finally tells me somebody's been assigned to look at it. And then I get, 3 weeks after that, somebody be in contact, but they're in a murder trial. It'll be a few weeks. I'm like, well, hey, my whole life got destroyed. Maybe somebody could hurry up. So I finally get a call. The guy's name's Tony Joya. He's now the number 2 at the DA's office. So Andy Vaughn got himself arrested for throwing bottles drunk on Christmas Day at like passing motorists. So this is the level of people I was dealing with to begin with. But the new number 2 calls me. And I went on Joe Oatman's show, and we actually played the recording of it because I recorded the phone call. It's legal to record in the state of Colorado as one party, and I don't care who the fuck it is. It was the DA's office. You have nothing to hide. You are literally who upholds the law. So I recorded it, and the guy is a complete jerk to me, man. Just a complete asshole. And I'll send it to you, Brian, so you can hear it. But I literally was like, they're not going to do anything. All right, it's time to play, right? So last week I get an email from Tony that says, they can't find anything beyond a reasonable doubt on the footage, and so they can't file anything. So I go to my open records request emails, and guess what I find? I find Tony Joya and Michael Allen getting invited to a party by chief, the law firm, the dad. Hey, come to my party on this date. So they're all fucking tied together, man, and they're all corrupt, and they're all milking each other. And this is back to our conversation, man. So you can catch in a local election on high definition video with audio, with these people literally like you didn't play this clip, but there's about an 8-minute clip that I'd love for you to go watch yourself.
I did the
But
pizza one.
Yeah.
I watched it.
So code words, they detailed how many votes they were good. There's a candidate underneath there with the poll watchers, and the guy's like, oh, by the way, they don't care when they're counting them. So that's what we've been doing. You got yours? So literally, like, the case was handed to them. I'm sure you saw the Excel file with every documented by who did it, what timestamp. All of that was handed to the DA's office, man. So I'm back to this. You can cheat a local election as long as you hire the right lawyer to defend you. Corruption will win. These people get to still stay in power. I've lost my job fighting for it. And there's no penalty. There is no penalty for being caught on film. So why do we see suitcases rolling out in Fulton County, Georgia, right? And nobody ever got charged with that? Because who was the DA down there, right? What's the punitive stuff in statutes? Should it be a misdemeanor of a $50 fine and a week in jail if you get caught cheating an election? No, it should be like 10 years prison because you're taking somebody's voice from them. You're literally taking somebody's right as a citizen of this country away from them. So we need stronger penalties. We need actual enforcement. And we do need voter ID, paper ballots, hand counts with so many fucking eyes on it that ain't no chance of it. Because without it, man, back to school boards, brother.
Yep.
70, 80 years in this country, school boards have been cheated by the left so they can poison our kids' minds. And we sat idle for that. How much of a takeover are we going to allow?
You're spot on.
That's my story, man.
You're spot on, Eric. I would love to figure out a way that I can review more of the footage if you still have it, so that I can.
Minute of it.
I would like to review more of it, see if I can put something together for you in terms of a consolidated clip to get more of this information out, because Teller County was unique in that it was a hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballot, and we eventually want to get to that point, and we're trying to get to that point. And you see, prosecutions of people like Colonel Conrad Reynolds out in Arkansas, who is getting prosecuted right now for electioneering. Same thing that woman was doing, electioneering. by conducting exit polls. So after they're done voting, which is by definition not electioneering, you're not trying to influence somebody's vote
Right.
by
They've already
asking
cast it.
them, because they've already cast the ballot. And the attorney general in Arkansas was on the record in the past saying that exit polling is not a form of electioneering, but he is facing charges right now for that. And so when the election fraud or the election crimes go one particular way, then there's an interest in prosecuting them. But
of course, right?
But if it threatens their, their power that they have over manipulating the elections and being able to ensure what they deem proper outcomes, then nothing gets investigated. And you see the corruption like you uncovered here with father, son, all the way down. And that's very concerning, Erik. So I would like, before we sign off here, of course, I want you to share out your socials so people can follow you and follow your story. But I would also like to continue on with you and get some more of that information.
Yeah, brother. I mean, look, I'm in this fight. I'm one of you guys now. So you can literally have every minute and every document. The beautiful thing is I still have a 10th Circuit. I'm just waiting on a panel assignment. So I'm going to win. The 10th Circuit just ruled on almost an identical case and remanded it for trial. So they get to now go to a jury. They get to procedure this for 3 years, right? Where they get to, motion to dismiss and hide everything. But once I get the right to a jury trial, everybody gets to see it. It's public record. And I'm making it public record now. So please, let's continue. My socials, Justice for Holt, X, TikTok, Facebook. Again, I've lost everything in this, so I have a GoFundMe and a Give, Send, Go Justice for Holt. Any dollar helps me stay in this fight. Court filings, everything. It's really tough. It's a lot when you're rebuilding a life. So again, I'm not gonna. It's really hard for me to ask for that. But if you can give me $5, you can give me $10. It keeps me in this fight, and I have the proof. I have the evidence, and I'll give it to everybody out there because it's not mine. It's America's, man. It's America's footage.
Amen. Erik, thank you so much for coming on again. Thank you for your service. And God bless you. God bless your daughters. God bless your family. And I hope we get justice for you, man.
Thank you. Free Tina Peters.
Amen. Amen. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, Justice for Holt on X, TikTok, Facebook, and GiveSendGo.com and GoFundMe.com/Justice for Holt if you guys can donate. And thank you guys all so much for tuning in. Stay frosty. God bless each and every one of you. God bless America. Make the fortune cookie country pay for this.